Hi, very beautiful community. Elon Musk is stoking violence in my country again. And this matters because it goes to the core of where power lies in our society and the irresponsible hands which control our public squares, the social media platforms. But it also points toward the internationalization of this wave of ex conservative, anti democratic populism that we are reckoning with globally, and about which in ideological definiteness we're going to talk about on the main channel in the next couple of days. So refresh yourselves with that channel if you haven't been there for a long time. I'm not going to show you what Musk has just said about my country, but it's awful, so I'll read it to you instead. He is addressing Tommy Robinson at the Tommy Robinson et al. Rally that's just taken place in the UK and attracted well over 100,000 citizens. And what I really invite you to do is to make a strong distinction between the citizens that go to a rally like that and some of the more overtly unlovely, exclusionary, or fascistized voices, or indeed just sheerly entrepreneurial voices that are leading the thing. So Musk said, you will have no choice. Whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die. Now, we want to outrightly condemn this statement from Musk and say that we are against all use of violence by citizens in a liberal democracy. What the hell is going on, specifically with Musk? A lot of people have come and said, look, Musk wants a Farage type politics in the UK so that he can remain free of regulation and protect his business interests. I don't believe for a moment that Musk's interventions in UK politics are driven by business interests. They're driven by, let me put this in a way that stays neutral on issues of neurodiversity, because we need to talk about neurodiversity in relation to Musk, but I won't do it now. It's a man who struggles to be self-transparent about how his brain works, is in denial about how his brain works, is not in control of his brain, and has a very compulsive relationship with emails and messages he gets from irresponsible people in the UK in private that tell him little nuggets about what's happening here, that leads him very rapidly to conclude, without checking the evidence, that things are happening in the UK which are not happening. So this intervention by Musk is extremely compulsive. It's utterly self-obsessed, but it's not self-interested. He thinks that he is helping Britain. And it is grossly irresponsible in an additional way, namely that he has lost control over his mind to such an extent that he's lost control over the distinction between real and virtual violence. And he's advocating violence as though he were dealing with a computer game or with a squabble on Twitter X, as opposed to real life. And one of the things we like to do on the channels is understand that sticks and stones are very different. Sticks and stones in real life are very different to video games, very different to social media, and also very different to other very nasty things that happen and other very nasty things that are said, but which don't yet involve sticks and stones. The application of force upon the physical bodies of other people. So it's very important to take seriously the extraordinary illegitimacy of Musk's power, because he has no legitimacy to run a public square in our society. It doesn't mean we have easy solutions to this, because the issue of the regulation of social media is a very difficult issue. It's also important to understand there's this global ideological wash of ex-conservative authoritarianism, which Musk represents. And it's also very important to understand that critiquing the grift, the entrepreneurialism, the post-truth opportunism of many political leaders and many voices with big audiences or many voices with big economic power is not the same as criticizing their followers. So we need to draw this distinction. And I've found a lovely tweet by a UK backbench MP that's going to help us do this. But first, let me read a tweet from commentator David Aronovich, who quite rightly points out that if Elon Musk had been an extremist imam making the same speech as that with which Musk addressed the Robinson rally, the demand that he be sanctioned would be overwhelming. But no, the hypocrisy of some erstwhile defenders of British values is stunning. But what about the people who were there? I think that on average, they were a lot less radical than the leaders. And actually, what's important is to say that your instinct has to be to complexify people in a rally like that rather than to oversimplify them and dismiss them. You complexify them, you realize that there are many sides to all of these people, that you can appeal to some of these sides and leverage them against others. And that if you don't do that, you're going to be conducting yourself unethically in politics, but also ineffectively. Because in the UK right now, the two main parties that have overwhelmingly dominated UK politics since after the first, years of the 20th century when the Liberal Party was still around, but they've dominated UK politics. And today in 2025, they polled together at 40% of the vote. So 40% is not what the polling is for Labour or the Conservative Party, it's what the polling for both parties together is. There's a very significant realignment of public sentiment across the West and in the UK too. And, what the political results of that look like, unless technocratic liberal centrism does better. So here's a tweet from Clive Lewis. And Clive Lewis is a backbench MP, so he's a Labour MP, but he's free to say whatever the hell he likes. So he says, believe it or not, I had an old friend on today's marches in London. He sent me some photos from the crowd. We went to middle school together and grew up on the same Eastern District Council estate in Northampton. I asked him why he was there, and he gave me two answers. The government doesn't listen to us, and I want to feel proud of my country again. He wore a Union Jack, not the St. George's Cross, as he said that one had been hijacked by racists. Now, I don't believe that's true. We don't give up that flag to any particular faction, and indeed it still belongs to, English sports teams when they represent the country. So we fight for that flag. We don't give it away to the ex-conservative right. He wasn't there for Hopkins. Katie Hopkins is a farcical online entrepreneur. He wasn't there for Musk or any of the professional grifters, as he put it. He was there to feel part of something bigger, though he admitted that there were a lot of, in his words, assholes there. Now, we haven't got the statistics stabilized yet, but my understanding is that so far there were about 20-25 police people injured, and maybe 4 seriously injured. But we're talking about that in the context of a rally with 110 plus thousand people, according to police reports, but I suspect more. So the friend's an electrician. He's smart. He's not racist, according to Clive Lewis, but he's not PC either. He's not a fan of Keir Starmer, but he also believes Farage would be a disaster. So that's actually quite interesting, because on the streets in the UK, the drift of opinion increasingly is to normalize Farage and to think that he is probably the best weapon the British public could use to give politics a kick up the backside. Now, I think that would be profoundly unconstructive, but I think that's where we're heading. Oh yes, he's a bundle of contradictions, but aren't we all? I don't know what box to put him in, or the millions like him. And I think pretending that all racists are fascists would be a massive mistake. Some were, but not all. This is not about This is about something bigger than immigration slogans or GDP numbers. For decades, we have hollowed out our national life, underfunding and undermining the very institutions that once brought us together. Karl Polanyi, writing in The Great Transformation in the 1940s, argued that when markets are disembodied from society, when land, labor, and life itself are treated as commodities, society pushes back. He called this the double movement. People seek to protect themselves, to reclaim dignity and meaning when everything solid seems to melt into the air. And when I saw my friend's photos, not just anger, and what I saw in my friend's photos was not just anger, but a demand for belonging. And this is very important because increasingly people are freaking out about not feeling at home in their own societies. And they've got to separate this into two baskets. The one basket says, I am sorry, nobody feels at home in the modern world. So we say, well, we've stopped feeling at home because we've got a whole bunch of immigrants here. But actually, we've stopped feeling at home because in modern societies, even people who are at home don't feel at home. So it's not that the people who emigrate to here were at home back where they came from, because there is a certain sense in which nobody is at home anyway today. That's one basket. The other basket says, yes, sure, of course, citizens have lost faith, understandably, in the idea that they control their country, in the idea that their country is sovereign in some kind of a wash of globalization, the idea that their country controls its borders. So that faith has been understandably lost by citizens, and it needs to be restored. We've replaced collective experience with atomization, without getting to nostalgic programs like the BBC's Generation Game once pulled in millions every Saturday night, giving us something we could all talk about on Monday morning. Now we watch Netflix, Disney, Prime, Paramount, alone in algorithmic silos, like the one we're in right now. Football used to be affordable and rooted in community. Now it's millionaires playing for the profitability of billionaires. The NHS, the post office, the railways, all chipped away, run down, sold off, or centralized, leaving people feeling powerless and disconnected. And don't get me wrong, some kind of Hovis labor nostalgia for the 1950s, Hovis bread, isn't the answer. The country back then was often intolerant, grey, and deeply unequal. It's so important not to engage excessively in ethical nostalgia about the past. But what we've built since is a society that gives people too little to hold in common, no collective story about who we are or what we're for. I reckon that's partly why my mate marched. Not because he wants to turn back the clock, but because he wants to feel pride again. Pride in a country that's inclusive, fair, offers a role for everyone. Pride in a nation that has a respected place in the world, tackles grotesque inequality, and gives people something real to believe in. Polanyi warned that when democracies fail to provide a humane alternative, the backlash can turn authoritarian. This is how fascism grew in the 30s, not because everyone became a true believer, but because millions felt abandoned and looked for strength, identity, and meaning wherever they could find it. If Labour and progressives don't offer a story that's a story of renewal, if we don't rebuild our national institutions, restore collective pride, and re-embed markets within society, the far right will do it for us in their own image. And by then, it'll be too late. So I don't want to say, oh, beautiful community, I am Vlad and I undersign every word Clive says. But structurally, what Clive is doing here is absolutely fundamental. He is doing what the constructive version of a populist expansion is. Now, we typically talk about populism as just a manner of speaking. For us, populism on the channels is when public discourse drifts toward resembling private sentiment. And that's the central conception of populism I still do want to use. But there are alternative conceptions which I don't want to asphyxiate, which say that constructively populism could be about expanding our sense of what range of questions it is okay to re-debate, reopen, and re-legislate on. what questions we can say, look, technocratic centrism has closed them, but we're going to open them up again. So that's a part of the kind of broadening that Clive is doing here. And you could put anything else in the boxes he is lining up there when he talks about a lack of a national project, when he talks about degradation of public services, when he talks about a feeling of sort of helplessness in the face of economic forces you don't control. All of these are reasonable things to put in these boxes. You could put other things in these boxes, or other things as well as the things he puts in there. But the problem is that you can't really deny the structure of what he's doing, which is he's opening up the political conversation to allow bigger critique. Because we need some critique of our critique, because our critique has become too impoverished. The critique of what's gone wrong, what's happening, that the liberal center or the resistance liberals are offering is not enough to defeat Trumps and Farages. It doesn't take enough responsibility for what we ourselves have done wrong. We in the center, we in the left, wherever the we that isn't the ex-authoritarian right is, including center-right folks too. So we've done a lot wrong. We've got to reflect on that. We've got to reflect on the way liberalism after the war in the West failed to realize its liberatory credentials and became a sort of minimalist, market-obsessed ideological sort of deformation. So that kind of opening up is very, very important. And then at a more practical political level, what Clive is doing is appealing to parts of his friend to which he can still speak, which might allow him to bring it about that the friend doesn't vote for Farage at the next election, as the friend, contrary to his criticism of Farage, I bet is still inclined to do. So I'm not going to say that this is the kind of communication we need from politicians. Politicians don't need to mention Karl Polanyi, and politicians can't quite speak as freely as Clive Lewis is speaking here. They're in government. But this is a model of a broadening of political conversation. That's our only way to challenge the unfathomable disgrace of this man we started with at the beginning, Elon Musk, who has completely lost control of his mind and is therefore lost control of any smattering of a sense of political responsibility and is doing enormous damage, not just in the United States, but now globally with his discourse and his mismanagement of his social media platform. Lots of love.